Hi there, I'm Dominic, and with me is,
Bob Furlong.
and we'd like to welcome you to Missing Briefs. Missing Briefs, where we unveil the untold business stories of lawyers, their trials, and their trials. And the objective of this podcast is to explore and narrate the compelling stories or briefs of lawyers who have experienced significant challenges and successes in the business of law. What was their gap? What were they missing? What is it they wish that they'd known? Well, we're going to find out. And it's our pleasure today to welcome Jennifer Durand, who's the founder and owner of Durand Family Law, a Canton, Massachusetts-based law firm specializing in, not surprisingly, family law. Jennifer, how are you today?
I am great, Dominic and Bob. Thank you so much for having me here today.
So, Jennifer, when did you decide that you wanted to become a lawyer?
Then I was very young. By at least by the age of 12, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, crazily enough. Um, and I didn't change my mind. I went straight from college to law school.
Well, and in your decision making, how did you choose family law over other disciplines?
When I was in law school, I took my second year a family law class, and I loved it. I liked sort of the client stories, for lack of a better phrase. And I did a co-op at Greater Boston Legal Services in the family law unit. And I really liked the combination of court time and working directly with clients. I didn't really foresee myself sitting in front of a desk pushing paper all day. And so the family law work combined court time and direct client contact in a way that really appealed to me. And I felt like I was actually helping clients. So the combination of both of those things really solidified it for me. And I started to try and find as much exposure to family law work as I could through the rest of law school. I went to Northeastern and they have a co-op program. And getting out of law school, I did a clerkship and in the probate and family court. And I've been working in family law ever since.
That's cool.
Terrific. So you're one of the lucky ones, Jennifer. Many of the lawyers that I meet, they didn't know when they were young what they wanted to be, but you knew from age 12, which is terrific. And you went after that. You went to law school. You knew you were going family law. You liked the stories. You liked the court stuff.
Did
Um, that's terrific. So obviously, what I want to really hear about, not that the history is not important, it is, but
fine.
what I really want to ask you about now is when you made that leap from working at, I'll call it a larger law firm, to actually setting out on your own. So tell me, what were some of the key challenges as you think back to when you started your law practice? What were some of the key challenges that you faced?
I'd been in a firm for almost 20 years at that point, so the prospect of going out on my own is a bit intimidating, right? I had a steady paycheck, and if I'm going to go out on my own, then I didn't know um, uh, the prospect of not having a steady paycheck is daunting,
Yeah.
to say the least. My oldest child at that point was about to start in the fall, was going to start her senior year of high school. So I knew I had college tuition impending. So the prospect of not having a steady paycheck with a large tuition bill impending in the future was a bit daunting. But then just the logistics of setting up a practice. I didn't know what that meant. I had worked in one. But what did I need to do? I needed to get liability insurance, and where do I get that from? Finding space, all of the stuff that goes into setting up an office, getting furniture, IT services, all that kind of stuff. I will put a plug in for Mass Low Map, Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers. They have a they have a program that's designed for setting up your own office.
Mhm.
And they did a training, and I went to the training, and they basically teach you all the fundamentals about opening up your own practice and almost a checklist of things to go through. And some of it's relevant, some of
Mhm.
it's not, but at least it sort of orients you of the things to think about. And essentially I would go through my little checklist of things I needed to do, and
Mhm.
didn't all get done at once, but eventually it all got done.
Yeah. So key challenges for you was number one, the loss of a paycheck after 20 years. That's pretty daunting, right?
It's a little daunting.
Yeah, timing for you, with your eldest kid becoming a senior in high school, timing was perfect to take that leap. It sounds like, but it also sounds like you were able to find that resource of LoMap, and that helped you with
Yes,
all those challenges that you had about finding insurance and all the things that come up when you start a business. So,
right.
so here's a question for you: knowing what you now know, what would you have done differently when you set up your business
I would have done it sooner.
sooner? Tell me more.
I had a wonderful experience. I worked at an amazing firm. I had a phenomenal mentor. I learned how to practice law from her. I couldn't have asked for a better mentor. Um, but going out on my own has been a wonderful experience. And in hindsight, I think I sort of built it up, and I think a lot of practitioners build it up in their mind to be a really scary experience. I mean, somebody sort of described it. You think you're going to step off a cliff, and it's sometimes like stepping off a curb. It's not quite as scary as you make it out to be. And if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have done it sooner.
Wow, that is very interesting. I love that phrase that you said there about stepping off. You feel like you're stepping off a cliff, but what you actually found, yeah, it was a step, but it was a curve. I love that.
Right.
I love that.
I can't claim credit for it. Somebody else said it, and I thought it was really appropriate.
You know,
But when you're also, I mean, you have to have, and I will say the other challenge is, I had clients, and when you open your own practice, you don't know who's going to come with you.
Sure.
I mean, I had clients that were mine, meaning they came to me when I was at my firm because of me, but they also, I had clients that had come in through the partner that I was working for. And along the way, they had sort of become mine, either in that instance or because they had come back and they were mine. And when I left, I didn't know it's the client's choice, right? When you leave a practice, the client gets to decide. Are they going to stay at the firm? Are they going to go with the lawyer who's leaving? Or are they going to find a new lawyer? And when you tell a client that you're leaving, they ultimately get to decide whether they're going to follow you or not. And it's daunting to say, who's going to come with me? I am I going to have clients and I'm going to have this new practice, or am I going to open a practice with no clients? So that was also a challenge in opening my own practice. And I think that's the sweet spot. I say I would do it sooner, but there's a sweet spot between doing it so soon where you don't have the clientele or the reputation, maybe that clients are not necessarily going to follow you.
got you, got you.
So you work in an area of the law that I can imagine can probably be very emotional for people, very personal, and they're going through often some kind of crisis, right, Jennifer?
That is very true.
And,
Yes.
so when we think of, when Dominic and I think about potentially referring a client to you, or a friend or family member, or anybody that happens to watch this podcast wants to do that, how do you find is the best way to make that connection? What's the best way to introduce you, or connect you to these people that could potentially work with you and benefit from your knowledge and your care?
I think, reaching out initially and saying, to me and saying, hey, I have somebody that I think is interested, that can help. Because if somebody is living in a part of the state where I'm not traveling to, I don't want to waste somebody's time. If their case is in Worcester, I'm not traveling out to Worcester. And wouldn't want somebody to actually reach out to me and say, I have this divorce and I want to go to Worcester. Will you help me when I'm
Mm.
not? So if I can do a little bit of triage initially and say, tell me where this client's located geographically, that can help. But otherwise, making an introduction saying somebody reached out, I've given them your name. They maybe are not sure if they're interested in a divorce, because I feel like sometimes I'll get an intro, it'll be the referrer and the client, and I never know what to do with that because
Mm,
it's
mm,
ultimately the client that needs to decide. So
mm.
I want to thank the person for thinking of me. It's very kind of them, but ultimately, if Dominic were to refer you to me, Bob, I would write back and say, thank you, Dominic. I appreciate that. Bob, I'll wait to hear from you, because
Mm,
ultimately you need
mm.
to take that first step. I don't want to ever say, Bob, when do you want to meet? Because I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to put that pressure. It's
Mhm.
ultimately a very personal decision about, especially if someone's initiating the proceedings, when they want to do that. And always walk that fine line if there's a three-way email about how best to respond.
Well, that's very helpful. And I think probably the best part of what you said was maybe that the initial outreach to you to give you a little bit of outline of the person to just to find out whether that's even the best fit for you and for them. I think that's
Right.
probably very helpful to avoid any kind of disappointments on either end.
Correct. And sometimes it's what I'll call an emergent situation. Somebody is needing to get into court more quickly, and I may or
Or
may not be able to accommodate that because of my schedule or whatever. And I wouldn't want somebody to reach out and I can't help them, but maybe there's either somebody else I can refer them to, or I can at least say to that whoever's the referrer, I can't, but if you don't have other names, I can give them to you. It's a little bit helpful to get that sort of feedback initially.
That's great. That's really, really helpful. And then there are going to be people, for those that are listening, watching this podcast right now, that have questions about your practice area. What's the best way for them to reach out directly to you?
Two ways. My website has a client connection link. So Durand Family Law, on the website, there's a client connection link and people can reach out. I get an email notification from that if people are interested and they want to contact me. And then email, which I will say I don't necessarily share my email fully. So if somebody has a referral, they can get it from the person who's making the referral, or they can go to the website. And the website does have my telephone number on it as well.
Well, that's great.
Jennifer Durand of Durand Family Law. It's been great talking with you today. Thanks for coming on, being a good sport, joining Bob and I, telling us about your trials and tribulations, about making that leap out, starting your own firm. I know you personally. I know you're a phenomenal lawyer, so I'd encourage anybody that is listening out there, if you do have questions, just reach out to Jennifer. So you've been listening to Missing Briefs, where we unveil the untold business stories of lawyer triumphs and trials. If you have an interesting story to tell us about your triumphs and trials of, starting out, owning your own firm, or maybe you know somebody that does have that experience, interesting story to share, get in touch with us. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Bob Furlong.
Until we meet again.